Well, I think it depends on the story and the audience. And some audiences, with some stories, no audience is going to continue with the story because they kind of had enough of it. And some audiences and some stories, there's going to be segments of the audience that want to continue. I think it kind of is up to you and like how far you can take it and how interesting you can make it, and whether you can engage people and keep people interested in it.
Film going is dropping off in America at the rate of 18%. It's only propped up by false ticket pricing of IMAX and 3D. I've been working with one of the guys who are involved in Blair Witch, on a larger scale idea that is kind of based around the fact of this community building aspect, and how do you engage people on an ongoing basis. And part of like the technique, is essentially, to borrow from another friend of mine, story R&D. Putting stories out in unpolished form with little bits and see how people play with them. Let it resonate, take it away, come back another day and use it in a more polished form so it's a better experience for them. Understand how it's played with, take it away, and then when you can bring it up, people will recall the experience that they've had, 6 months, 12 months ago, and start to see how it fits into a bigger equation. And some of that knowledge that I have changes the way that I start to develop screenplays. So instead of looking to make the movie that solves all the answers, America, loves the backstory, loves the psychological setup, and it's a closed world, very unlike the real world that we all live in, where there's a great element of unknown. So in a transmedia immersive storytelling world where you're not answering all the questions ahead of time, you're going to leave these things for you to solve a little bit later, for the crowd to solve a little bit later, for you to be able to fill in, kind of like Lost maybe, and trying to look at that, leaving those gaps so that you can keep it expanding in different ways.
May I speak to that? Is that like a perfect example would be Jon's app with the graffiti that the audience or the participators, add to it and have it grow on this other level, this whole other backstory, this whole other commentary, this whole other extras from the original.
Right, it's a matter of like allowing people a way to, participate.
That part is.
And not only allow them, but also to encourage them, because there are people who will naturally participate, but, there are other people who are going to need to be encouraged to participate, and not everyone's going to participate. Yeah. So it's a matter of like who
appeals to that audience.
Right. Yeah, it just depends on, and you can't expect everyone necessarily to participate. Question? I'm like burned out from earlier today. It's like I was talking all day, and it's just like I'm happy to just listen to Ted. So
now you're in the hot seat.
No. Questions? I mean, I think it depends. It's still a matter of getting people, like how are the filmmakers who are making those films getting people to go out to the theaters?
Well, one of the things we did is we were given by the CBS affiliate a half an hour every Saturday night for this last season. And we did a TV show with volunteers, and we spotlighted the different filmmakers, showed their shorts. There was a huge interest. Then we showed their features. They had a feature. But,
And then did people come out based on that?
Yes, on the features. A lot of them, we sold out on those.
Oh, well, that's good.
But
it's just, it's a little bit, which is great, but it's like, is the CBS affiliate going to give a half hour in every city where those films are playing? And that's like the big kind of question.
That's a lot of money if you're buying it.
If other cities asked if there would be TV stations that would give them that, if they were doing the same thing. But not only that, when we show the feature, the theater is giving, and this is the one that does the feature is a smaller one. It's not the AMC, but they're giving 45% of the ticket sales back to the filmmaker.
Right, which is a, like a good split, but a traditional, kind of semi-traditional split. But I think it's up to filmmakers to kind of like make those screenings kind of memorable, you know, and to make them different. It's like what I always say is like, how do you make those special, different than what someone would just get if they rented the movie at home in some fashion and watched it at home.
Beyond the
You know,
Q&A.
right, just kind of making some kind of event that makes it valuable for their audience. You know, it's like essentially where, oh my God, where where essentially where content, you know, is available, you know, in any shape or form, and getting into a world where anyone can get a film however they want. Like, what are you going to do to make what is scarce that you can provide to your audience, that your audience will then be motivated to participate in that scarcity?
Well,
So what kind of scarce products, and so like, and this boils down to appearing in person, creating events, creating environments, creating different kinds of experiences, creating different kinds of merchandise, you know, that they'll want to participate.
But I mean, the danger, you know, because I see this in many different aspects of culture, is that we end up being just kind of repetitive. We're adding on, and there's a dulling that goes on. You know, I love Kickstarter, but please, I'm getting so many of these requests of like, look at my thing, and and I see someone else getting a tattoo of their movie, and I'm shaving my head for this, and you know, and I'll send you this thing that I made very personally just for you for it, and it ends up being dulling, right? You know, the thing that amazes me is we're now what, 50 years or so since Rocky Horror Picture Show, you know, came out. Like, we're almost at the 50th anniversary of Rocky Horror Picture Show, and that was this perfect event that made people feel that it was a community, that made you want to go to the live aspect of the recorded show, and we haven't replicated that in any, you know, strong way, you know, since then. And we can do better. We can do better.
If you're saying that that's the case, though, if we keep going back to that, then why are we talking about what we're moving beyond? I'm trying to understand how we're identifying with audiences that have a need and a want for more, and we're trying to anticipate or identify what that is and build towards that, when we're unable, when in the same breath we're saying that people are asking for the exact same thing. And I don't see how you reconcile that.
Well, the way you reconcile, I would just go back to being in touch and connecting with your audience and figuring out what they want. You know, and trying to
then how do you have the two same comments? That's the part of it that I don't understand.
What are the two
well,
same
isn't
comments?
isn't that a sign of intelligence, is to hold two contradictory ideas at the same time?
No, but what do you? But I don't understand what are the two opposing comments? I don't understand.
What I was hearing before is that we're talking about what we're building towards and what we're trying to, where there's opportunity, what we're talking about in terms of development, and what the anticipation is there's identifying what the needs are, what the desires are of our audiences, who's coming, what do they want. But at the same time, in the same breath, what I was hearing also is that we're asking for the same things that we've been asking for the past 40 years, not 50 years. But, you know, it's that...
Sounds better, though.
But it does. I'm not disagreeing with that piece. But, you know, it's those pieces. And
I think that Ted's saying that.
I'm not sure if there's an answer.
But I think it's like
trying to be confrontational. It's just
no. But I think it's like.
It's a weird dichotomy.
But I don't think it's a dichotomy at all. Ted's using an example of one specific type of event, and it's up to the filmmaker to create different kinds of events. The key is that people like to be with other people where something interesting is going on, and something live, and something that can't be replicated or isn't replicated or is rare is going on. You know, watching a film.
But sharing that experience that you're sharing with a group of people doesn't make it different. Just because it's something that you can encounter in different instances with what you're sitting in front of, just because you're gathering in the same way doesn't mean that that experience is any different.
But I think there's a couple things that come into it. You know, first of all, the question of, you know, why hasn't there been other examples of this since Rocky Horror Picture Show? I think that the real answer to that is we haven't needed it to be, right? The business was working kind of fine, you know, and the gatekeepers were in control, you know, for such a long period of time. The potential of doing these things, I think it really exists in many different forms. And the problem is we still think of ourselves as feature filmmakers first and foremost.
And I said, I mean, I kind of leaned over, you know, to the friend and was saying, it was like, I kind of feel like this is a conversation about like pre-jazz singer. It's like, are we at that point now? I don't know. I mean, but I kind of feel like we may be at that point where we're kind of hitting that brink.
What's the original point that it was a memorable event? Well, I think that was the original point, is that the theatrical element was that it was a memorable event. It was, and that this is held on for nearly 50 years.
And, you know, and a memorable event shared with your community, which is a big part. You know, it's when you try to look at the lessons learned from the collapse of the music industry and how they built some things up. You know, transformation from a business based on recorded medium to one that's based on live events. That's one big change. The other big change is it opened up to a wide variety of artists, you know, who now earn a living in the music business. No one earning these huge piles of cash that they used to, but a much wider group. Also, 12% of the music industry's revenues comes from direct artist sales. 12%. The film business had 0% of direct artist sales. So we kind of look at how they diversified. You know, how do we diversify from a single product medium, recognizing both memory, you know, pleasure, sharing, you know, expansion, an ongoing process, you know, physical elements, like all of these things are part of our arsenal that we haven't felt we needed to use before, and now we have to use.
And I would say that I think
she's had her hand up for a lot. I feel.